What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast. How are we doing? Hopefully everyone's having a good day. We got a lot going on. We had some breaking news on Tuesday. Joe Flacco back in the saddle, baby. The Colts announced he's going to be the starting quarterback. Some thoughts on that situation. We talked about it yesterday, which was basically a move they had to make after the situation on Sunday with the poor play and then taking himself out for a play that universally every single player has fired back on. So we'll dive into that situation. A lot going else on around the NFL as well. Want to dive into the Lions and Dan Campbell. The NFC East is getting awfully interesting. And a rumor that I think is going to gain some steam as we move forward when it comes to the New York Jets and who will be their future coach. And something we do every Wednesday, Kauff on campus. I want to fly around. We got Penn State, Ohio State this week. You got Oregon. Looks like they're rolling. Curt Cignetti might never lose a game again until he plays Ohio State. But some thoughts on Indiana and just his future in general. So very, very excited. Today's a fun day. But before we dive in to football, I got to tell you about my friends, my partners in the official ticketing app of this podcast, Game Time. Do you want to smile? Do you just want to laugh? Because you get on the internet, everyone's so angry. Then you go out in society and just people aren't that angry. People are having a good time. They aren't just sitting on their phones nonstop. And you realize sometimes you just got to smile. Life is not that bad. And if you want to go to a comedy show, Game Time's got you covered. Go to a comedy show, have some laughs, have a few cocktails. You want to go to a concert? You want to enjoy a Friday night, a Saturday night? I know I have. I've been to several concerts over the last couple of years because of these guys. And it's always really enjoyable. You get out, you start singing some songs, you dance a little bit, and you have a good time. And you can do it with Game Time. You can search the venue, you can search the artist, where they're touring, when they're coming. If you want to go see something in another city, maybe take a weekend to go enjoy yourself, do it with these guys. Obviously, pro sports, college sports, basketball, baseball is about to end, or by the time you're listening to this, might already be over. But obviously, college and pro football, if you want to go to a game and have a good time, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code John for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. I want to start with Flacco and the Colts. And, there was some visuals going around in 49er land after the Cowboy 49er game on Sunday night of all the 49ers giving Trey Lance a huge hug. And I think one thing we learned in that experience is when you are trying to win and you have a team, now the Niners are better than the Colts, but when you have playoff expectations, it is very, very difficult to develop a project because they need a lot of work and they can single-handedly lose you games. Even when you have a ton of other guys, veteran players, impact players on long-term contracts who are playoff ready, who are big game ready. And I was watching that Colts game thinking, God, Gus Bradley, their defense, they were getting pressure on CJ Stroud. Now, you could say a lot of people are because the Colts or the Houston offensive line's not playing that well. But Jonathan Taylor looked like the guy from a couple years ago. Their weapons, they're flying around. And Anthony Richardson's been terrible. Then the moment happens when he taps out. It goes viral. Every former player chimes in, basically not just making fun of him, but honestly kind of offended because it feels like an unprecedented moment in football history. A non-injured quarterback, a guy that's not rotating in and out, taps out because he's exhausted. And they didn't have a choice. So Schefter reported that they met yesterday. To me, the decision was made after his press conference when he kind of laughed it off. But when you look at Anthony Richardson, part of drafting a project is the only way you really get better is by playing. Well, part of playing is working through the problems, working through the issues you have to improve. And he needs so much work that he became a liability for the Colts. And then because they had Joe Flacco on their team and he got injured, they saw firsthand, like, actually, we're not bad when Joe Flacco's playing. And this is 2 straight years. Has to be one of the more bizarre careers of all time. Obviously, Super Bowl champion, made a ton of money in Baltimore, and then it felt like his career was over. Then he goes to a team with the highest paid quarterback in the history of the league. That guy gets injured. He comes in, he leads the team to the playoffs. Then obviously they don't resign him because they don't want the fans chanting Flacco week 1, which everyone thinks is crazy, but is kind of understandable when the owner's like, we got to make this work. Then he goes to the Colts, and everyone from like, 20,000 foot view goes, I can see this becoming a problem. And then Anthony Richardson gets hurt. He comes in, he starts throwing bombs. And it was clear before Anthony Richardson came back from his injury that the best player at that position for this team is Joe Flacco. It's not even debatable. Sitting on your couch, if you're in the front office, but most importantly, if you're in that locker room. So Joe Flacco then takes out a $230 million quarterback, a guy that was drafted in the top 5 in like 8 months. And he's just better than. And they had to do this. They did not have a choice. Like, this choice was made for them on Sunday. Not just with his performance, but with the moment and then the press conference. So the Indianapolis Colts prove again, if you take a huge project and your team sucks, it doesn't matter. You can live through the lumps. You can live through the losses. You can live through games where they throw well under 50% completion percentage. Hell, Anthony Richardson threw, I think, 10 for 32. I'm no math major, but it's under 30% or 33%. It's not very good. So when they make this move, I think the question mark is, and they've already started pushing out through local media, that we're not giving up on them. We need a reset, but we're not giving up on this player. And that is true. But if Joe Flacco plays and plays like he's been playing this year and last year, Anthony Richardson is not going to see the field again, which is a big picture problem because they drafted this guy 4th overall to develop him and turn him into a high-end top 10 quarterback. And you have no chance to do that on the bench. And some similarities to Trey Lance, this guy has not played a lot of football. Talking to a scout yesterday, he was injured in college. He then didn't play that much in Florida, only had 1 full year starter or as the starter, and the team went 6-6. Then he comes to the Colts and he immediately gets injured. And then year 2 was supposed to be his year, gets injured again. And now he gets benched. And I also was thinking about, we put so much hype, and I'm guilty as anybody, into drafting these quarterbacks really high and taking big swings on these guys. Most of them do not work. Think how often these top 10 picks now over the last 5 years have been a disaster. I mean, obviously the class of Fields is now a backup again. Mac Jones is a backup. Zach Wilson's a backup. Trey Lance is a 3rd stringer. You have Anthony Richardson, who has barely played in the NFL and has been benched in year 2. Got benched in year 2. Bryce Young also got benched in year 2. Like, these are disastrous situations. I think fans, like coaches and like GMs, can live with struggles if there's just a ton of upside and you tangibly see it. But when you watch this guy play, you go, I don't know, man. For this to even be functional, he's going to have to take massive strides. And then the moment that happened in the game is just something that's really hard to shake. Obviously, it was an embarrassing moment for him, even though at the time I don't even think he realized. And I've had a couple people in the NFL that think the reaction about that is maybe a little over the top. This is a guy that's barely played. He almost doesn't even know what he doesn't know. And I do think there's probably some validity to that. But like I said on Monday, that I think the difficult part is is you're in the AFC with arguably three of the best and brightest talents and quarterbacks I've ever seen, right? Mahomes, Josh, and Lamar. And I was thinking about it today on the Stairmaster, trying to not be so fat, is that like I would say obviously they all, Josh is this 6'5, 240 pound. He can run, huge arm. Lamar has become this outstanding passer, and he's obviously one of the best athletes we've ever seen. Mahomes is one of the most dominant big game players we've ever seen, champion 3 times over. But when I think about those guys, the competitive nature of them, the competitive character, the will to win, the will to compete, the will to battle when things aren't going well are things that stand out to me. For as tangible as all their attributes are, I think their intangibles have led them to become great players. So that moment, while I don't think it determines his success or failure the rest of his life, had to be pretty jarring for Chris Ballard to change Steichen. It really did. And they can say whatever they want. They can try to spin this however they want. It'll be interesting as the players talk throughout this week, their reaction to everything. And I think if they like the guy, and by all accounts, he's a high character, good guy, they will attempt to support him. But that is something that's hard to shake. For as bad as the Tyreek Stevenson moment is, he's been a 2-year starter. He's a high-end player. It was an awful moment, an embarrassing moment, a losing moment, and something that I would imagine really sucks for him. But all of his teammates know, like, we've been going to war with this guy for 2 years. And our defense has become one of the best units in the league. And he's played a large role in that. Like, we need this guy. We want this guy. And we feel comfortable in battle with this guy. Now, I can't have you poking Terry McLaurin's eye or taunting, the crowd. But you're not, that moment's embarrassing for all of us. And like I said yesterday, I think you could make him inactive this week to try to set the tone. This is not okay in our locker room. But we don't question the player. And it's like, okay, now we got competitive question marks, but we've been questioning the player. So at the end of the day, this was a no-brainer move, the right move. And I think the question mark is, if Joe Flacco plays well, we're not going to see Anthony Richardson the rest of the year, which is a problem for the Colts because they invested a really, really high pick, which is a very, very valuable asset because of what it can give you, right? You can trade back and accumulate picks. Like Howie Roseman says, every team in the league has the same amount of money in draft compensation. But the reason on a yearly basis, some teams' caps are different, some teams have more picks than others, is because each individual team, GM and head coach, and obviously some teams the owner, dictates how you want to use that capital. And they went all in. And I understood it. But there's no way around it. As of October 29th, this Anthony Richardson draft pick, when you factor in the injuries, when you factor in the poor play, and now when you factor in this moment forcing you to bench the guy for a player that's going to be 40 years old in a couple months, is a pretty epic disaster. And like I said, this is not out of character for these high picks. This has kind of been a consistent theme now. And I was talking to someone in the league that scouts college players. He's like, this quarterback class is bad. Like, we got a problem right now. There aren't a bunch of guys in college that you feel good about going to your draft meetings going, yeah, this guy can be a starter in the NFL. Talking about a lot of these players being like, yeah, I hope he's a good backup. And you look around the NFL or the college football, like, I think there are some question marks right now with that position. So it's not easy for the Colts just to pivot off this. And you can already see it coming. Like, is this one of those where at the end of the year, you don't bring Flacco back if things go well because you want to make this easy on Anthony Richardson? There's obviously a different level of investment when it comes to his contract relative to last year's situation with Deshaun Watson because he's, on a rookie contract scale. But being the 4th overall pick, you don't make nothing. He's not making $1 million a year. My guess is he signed for over $30 million guaranteed being the 4th overall pick. So this is a problem for the Colts. And this is a major problem for Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard. And it might just be one of those situations that, even if it's like, hey, I got to get in better shape, that will never happen again. I do think there is potential truth that might be the case. But the bottom line is he might just not be good enough. Despite all the great physical attributes, despite his speed, his size, his arm power, maybe he's just not very good. And he's not alone if he falls under that category. The NBA is finally back. A new season means new ways to get into the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Who's draining threes from beyond the arc? Who's hit the boards, getting rebounds? Get behind your favorite players on prop bets you can make on DraftKings, the home of NBA player props. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting something simple, like picking a team to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and place your bet. First time, new DraftKings customers bet $5 to win $200 in bonus bets instantly. Take it to the rack with DraftKings Sportsbook. Every point counts. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. I saw a rumor today floating around, or a couple days ago, on the interweb, and Rex Ryan was doing local television hits or local radio hits in New York. And obviously he's asked, like, would you consider the job? And I hadn't heard his name floating around, and his response on a local radio station in New York was like, hell yeah, I'd do it in a heartbeat. And then I talked to someone that might know a little something. He's like, don't be surprised if there's some legs to this rumor as the season goes on. Because Woody Johnson didn't want to fire Rex back when they did. He had hired John Idzik. Idzik did not like him, and he just let him pull the trigger. But if you look at the Jets, who, it's hard to even know what's going to happen this Thursday. You'd be insane to bet on them. But is it possible, home game, short week, that they win a game? 100%. The Texans just lost another receiver, Diggs, out for the year, which is not ideal because, he was productive for them. And when they're fully healthy, he just kind of got to act as their third receiver. So that's a pretty big blow. But if the Jets were to lose on Thursday night, I think it's very conceivable that Joe Douglas, the GM, whose contract is over at the end of the season, is fired. So then they would have fired Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas in like less than a month, and they would have no head coach and a GM. Regardless how this thing's finishes, Jeff Ulbrich is not going to be their coach. And obviously there's this elephant in the room. If Trump's the president, Woody Johnson, everyone universally thinks he's just packing up and going back overseas. He loved that. He loved the way he was treated. I don't quite know, if you were a super rich guy and owned a football team, why you would want that role, but clearly he loves that role. And everyone agrees that is in the loop when it comes to the Jets, he is going to go. So then his brother would take back over. Now, they're in a coaching search essentially kind of right now. When you fire Robert Saleh, you can be making all the calls you want. So I do think it's fair to say, even if Woody takes back off over to whatever country he's going to go to, that he's still going to be very involved in this decision. And can the Jets, Robert Saleh, first-time head coach. Look at the Giants. Joe Judge, first-time head coach. McAdoo, first-time head coach. Now Brian Daboll, first-time head coach. Like, are they really going to be in the business of first-time head coach? And everyone, and rightfully so, loves the Detroit offensive coordinator. He's been turning down jobs for 2 years in a row. Whether you call it cold feet, whether you call it apprehension of his own skills, of being the leader. I don't know all the details. I've heard a lot of different rumors, but the reality is he just won't accept a head coaching job. At least he hasn't so far. And everyone thinks that obviously he's going to be back in the mix. Everyone's going to want to talk to him. That's a pretty big leap from just calling an offense with an elite offensive line, a quarterback, even before he came to the Lions, had been a guy that helped lead a team to the Super Bowl and been a good player. They have elite offensive weapons at wide receiver, tight end, at running back. It's like, well, we don't have that here. we got a lot of question marks. And our quarterback, whether he comes back again or retires, like we got a quarterback problem on top of offensive line issues, on top of receiver issues. Our defense is now in shambles. Like this is a very, very difficult job. You could argue that the Jets cannot afford to risk hiring a guy that doesn't have any experience. I watched a little bit of, I don't know why my nose itches, of Rex Ryan on the Pivot podcast. And he talked about how desperately he wants to be a head coach anymore. And it wasn't because he got out of the league because he didn't want to do it. It's because people stopped calling him. And even last year, if you remember, when the Cowboys defensive coordinator job became open, he called Jerry. So this is a guy that desperately wants back in the league. Will do anything possible to become a head coach again. To me, if you're the Jets, I don't even think it's that crazy. One, you could do way worse. And two, you get a guy who comes in extra motivated, who would inspire the fan base a little bit of like, hey, can't be worse. We know he knows schematics, right? He is a defensive genius. He has been long allotted throughout the course of his career as one of the best defensive scheme guys in the league. We know he's a pretty good leader and good with players. His offensive coordinator hire is very, very important, obviously. But I actually think it makes a lot of sense. And if I were the Jets, you'd be hard-pressed to the Bobby Slowicks, Kubiak, and that team's fallen off a cliff. But, like, you can't hire one of those jobs. You see the intensity of New York. It is hard. Everyone's watching you. The intensity of it, we talk about it all the time, the hype on these players. The way Sauce Gardner's playing right now, which is not very good, that would never happen under Rex Ryan. You know for a fact a good defensive player takes a step up, not a regression. Their pass rush would not look like this. It would not be tolerated. So, listen, is it a no-brainer? Of course not. But when you kind of look at the options and you look at their situation, I think Rex Ryan makes a lot of sense. Curt Cignetti, who we'll get into in a little bit, is obviously the toast of the town, not just in Bloomington, but in the college football world. And when you look at his resume, he really got put on the map when he started coaching for Nick Saban. He got there year one, and he was there for 3 or 4 years when they started, built it up, and won a national championship. And I was thinking the other day, like, would you rather be a part of Nick Saban, of Bill Walsh, of Jeff Bezos in the early stages, or once it's really rolling? Like, if you met someone from Amazon who was like, I was there with Jeff from 97 through 04, or you met a guy from Amazon, like, yeah, I started working from 2010 to 2018. Right? Like Lane, Sark, you have so many guys that showed up when the train was humming down the tracks. Right? If you showed up for Bill Walsh in 1987, like they already got 3 Super Bowls. Or 2, I guess. But if you were there in both, like I showed up with Bill Walsh in 1979 and I left in 1986. You're like, what was that like? How'd you guys do that? And I was thinking about Dan Campbell, who, because my opinion is I would choose to be there at the beginning. I think those lessons, the experiences, the ability to start something from scratch is something you can't teach. And when you're around in those situations, they will carry with you whenever you go on your journey and you leave that place the rest of your life. It doesn't mean that being around those people once they've made it and once they have the structure, the infrastructure, the understanding of exactly what it takes in the peak of their powers isn't valuable as well. But I don't think what the Lions have done these last 4 years, everyone associated with that organization, they've really had the same coaching staff for the most part for 4 straight years. Dan Campbell's been very, very lucky. Now, he fired Anthony Lynn and elevated Ben Johnson these last couple of years, but Ben was there, originally as well. I don't think it can be overstated how incredible it is what they're doing and how difficult it is what they have accomplished. Are they ever going to win a Super Bowl? I don't know. They might not. It's very, very difficult. There's only a select few quarterbacks who have won a Super Bowl like the last 6, 7 years. But to turn this franchise into what was easily, I would say, the most consistent joke, just perpetually laughed at in pro football over my entire life. I'm 40 years old now. And turn them into an absolute power. The other thing I was shocked is looking at Dan Campbell's record. His first year, he was 3-13-1. And there's that famous meme of him kind of crying. Got the nose itches. Him crying when he was interviewed about the effort and what those players on the team meant to him. And he gets teary-eyed of just their effort, even though they were 10 games under 500. To what he's turned them into, of being what I think most people think, if they can just keep relative health, is going to be a 100% a team that can win the Super Bowl. That could be the number one overall seed. And this is not the 49ers. This is not the Philadelphia Eagles. This is not the McVay Rams. This is the Detroit freaking Lions. They hadn't been to the NFC Championship game since 1991. His record now with the Lions is over 500. And I think they had a clear vision. And I think you got a guy who, like, that job is not something that could have been turned around by someone who wasn't a crazy ass. Like, part of what we love about Dan Campbell, this old school football guy, kind of an insane dude. Like, you sometimes need that when you're taking over a complete dumpster fire. That's what you have to be. And him, Brad Holmes, the general manager, what they have done is honestly one of the most incredible things we've ever seen in the NFL. It really is. And if you're a Lions fan, I can't even imagine what the feeling is like. Because for the most part, the only game that ever mattered for your season was the Thanksgiving morning game. And it felt like you typically lost that. And you drafted high all the time. And now it feels like, should they just put all their chips in the middle of the table to try to win the Super Bowl? When did we ever talk like that? When did that ever happen? And they didn't draft a quarterback in the top 10. Some of their high-end players were honestly much maligned on draft day. People thought they were crazy for trading back from 6 to 12 to get Jahmyr Gibbs, who, I don't know, I looked up last week, he was running like 90 miles an hour down the sideline for a touchdown. And they also got an extra pick, which led them to Sam Laporta. Or Brian Branch in the second round, who looks like, I don't know, Ed Reed Jr. right now, who I was texting with a scout, like, how did this guy fall this far in the draft? And they're like, well, he was a little undersized. And two, he basically just played nickel corner at Alabama. So there's some question marks of like, you're going to draft just a nickel corner that high? And it turns out he's transitioned to safety perfectly. And obviously he can cover the slot and he has incredible ball skills. I mean, he's a fantastic player. Kind of feels like what Tyrann Mathieu was to when Bruce Arians got the job in Arizona. The heartbeat of the defense. Definitely the back seven. Now with Aiden Hutchinson out, it's not even really debatable. But they did it the right way. They build up a team. They didn't do what everyone thought they should do. Take Jamar Chase. They took Penei Sewell. And it worked. I guess Jamar Chase went ahead of Penei Sewell, but and listen, Jamar Chase has been awesome for the Cincinnati Bengals as well. But I think it's fair to say is like they would have taken Penei Sewell no matter what. Because when you watch their team, like that's kind of what they feel like. Now they're more explosive on offense than a lot of these Jim Harbaugh level teams. But I feel like Dan Campbell's a third Harbaugh brother. And I think sometimes, really the only times you can rebuild a franchise like this is to get a guy like that. Because 95% of people, even guys that would be successful, would get overwhelmed, would fail. And Dan Campbell hasn't only, not failed. He's been one of the biggest success stories, I would say, so far through a short career in my lifetime when you factor in what he's done with the Lions. Can I tell you about my friends at Via? I don't know about you, but I've never been a great sleeper. And Via sent me some products, this Dreams product right here, which is a great sleep aid. And I'm not a huge THC guy, but I do like a little bit. And the best part about Via is any product you order, you can create from 0 to 100 milligrams of THC. So if you're more of a CBD person, you can also do the same. And for example, in Dreams, it has 5 milligrams of THC and 90 milligrams of CBD. Cloud9, which, can you guys see that? I like to take when just hanging out watching a little football, maybe on a Saturday. Take a couple. Same thing, 5 milligrams of THC, 50 milligrams of CBD. Product's fantastic. Easy to eat, gummy, you're hanging. My sleep has improved dramatically. I've been getting up a lot earlier, mainly because it's been a lot easier to fall asleep. I cannot recommend this product enough. Like I said, their products range from 0 to 100 milligrams of THC. If you want more, you can get products with more. If you want less, very, very easy to order products with less. They have award-winning service. It's made in the USA. So if you're 21 plus, check out the link for Via in our description and use the code JOHN, John, for 15% off. After you purchase, let them know where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. This fall, enhance your everyday with Via. Before we get into Kauff on campus, it really is crazy. The Cowboys look headed for, I don't know, 6-7 win season. I mean, they're in shambles. I don't have a huge problem with Diggs, screaming at some local reporter. It's like, why are reporters, why are people that talk about this stuff, myself included, allowed to be critical, and someone wants to get back at you, they just not allowed to say anything? So I have no issue with that, even though when you factor in, it feels like the Cowboys were in shambles. Kind of a rough visual. I get it, but I never have a problem with players being mad about what's being said, about them when these people, like, they get criticized nonstop. Like, eventually some people just draw a line in the sand, especially if they think you're wrong. And that was his whole thing, which I don't really care. But the Eagles, if you would have told the Eagles at the beginning of the season that the Cowboys are not going to be a factor for the playoffs, I think they would have felt pretty good. Like, we might cruise this division. And I'm going to keep hammering this point home. The power of getting the coach and quarterback right changes your franchise. It really does. Everyone talks nonstop about how the Washington Commanders have gotten rid of the stink of Daniel Snyder. And I can imagine internally in the building, for coaches, for the front office, for the non-football people, marketing, the president, it's probably incredible. But what really happened is they just hired the right guy and they drafted the right player. Like, so many teams fail because they get one of those two positions wrong or both. If you have the wrong coach, you have the wrong quarterback, one or the other, or both, you have no shot. None. Like, ultimately, the Jets' downfall, yeah, Rodgers is a shell of himself, but their coaching staff stinks. If they had a good coaching staff, they would not be 2-6. That doesn't mean they would be 6-2, but they would not be 2-6. You have to have a good coaching staff. And then obviously you have to have good players. They go hand in hand. Bill Walsh doesn't exist without Joe Montana, and Joe Montana doesn't exist without Bill Walsh. Say the same thing about Belichick and Brady. You need each other. And now you have a team, if you're the Eagles, like, I think the Eagles roster is better. I think most people would agree. Hell, I think the Bears roster is better than the Commanders. That's why the Bears are taking so much shit. It's like, I think we got better players. It's like, yeah, we don't have a better coaching staff. I mean, what was the difference in that game? Seriously, what was the difference in that game? 100% coaching. The fullback dive to the offensive lineman, which was a fumble. The second to last play of the game, where they just gave up a free 15, 16 yards, which put them in Hail Mary territory. and then a starting quarterback who's just screwing around. And I didn't realize, I watched it again yesterday, how late he turned around. I mean, they weren't just running off the line. They were halfway there going full speed. So he was really discombobulated. And you have to put that on Eberflus. 100%. Also on the player, but like that moment to me just doesn't happen with a high-end coach. So I understand where Bears fans go, I'm out on this coaching staff. Totally agree. But if you're the Washington Commanders, you're like, I'm in on my coaching staff. And listen, the Eagles, they have so much talent. That Saquon Barkley move has been pretty incredible. I mean, he looks fantastic. And defensively, still got some question marks. They've eaten up some bad offensive lines in the last couple of games. Can they get pressure? You know, the Commanders' offensive line actually is not playing terribly. But when they play better teams, can they get the pressure? That we'll have to keep an eye on that. Darius Slay on an island, how does that look? But offensively, when AJ and Devontae are healthy, and they will get Goddard back, and if Jordan Mailata is okay and they get him back as well, like their offense is just so loaded that Kellen Moore, you can nitpick him all you want, but it's pretty hard to screw that up. And Jalen definitely has played with more confidence these last couple of weeks. I think part of it, he's more willing to run. I mean, that was a big problem with Jalen last year. It's like he wouldn't run. And part of it, he was banged up or whatever. Jalen's star attribute is the dual threat. Is he can run at any moment, and he throws a gorgeous deep ball, which he's very confident throwing, especially when 11's going down the field, even 6 as well. Like he's very confident pushing the ball down the field to those two guys. They should win the division. But you have a moment like that against the Bears, you just go, I don't know. This thing could get weird. And I think there's a lot of pressure now on the Eagles. Like it's division championship or bust, because they're going to be a playoff team. But if you were to somehow not win this division and let a rookie quarterback and Dan Quinn come right in the division and win it, like if I was a betting man today, I would bet on the Eagles. But when they play, if they both have the same record, there's going to be all the pressures on Philly. All the pressures on Philly. And it's going to be fun to watch. Okay, let's go to college football, as we like to call it, Kauff on campus. When's the last time I've been on a campus? I guess last year I went to the Fresno State game. Fresno State killed them, which probably wouldn't happen this year because Arizona State's a lot better. But I, like many people, usually get up pretty early on Saturday nights. The older you get, you don't drink as much, and you can wake up at like 6 or 7 a.m. on Saturday and Sunday pretty easily. And I get up and I walk right out to the living room and I turn on College Game Day. And it was cool. From Bloomington, Indiana, Signetti. And obviously Signetti's been all over social media. His team's been awesome. I've watched them play. I didn't believe in them going into that Nebraska game. That game, having money on Nebraska, made me a believer. Watched them again against Washington with their backup quarterback. Kick ass and take names. They are fantastic. It is, regardless of the story, like they're a really good team. Like that's a real college football team in terms of like, if they make the playoffs, it's not some fluke. That team has they're really good on defense. But I was texting with someone the other day, like, and I saw a clip where Signetti says, listen, right now I got everything I want here. My wife likes it. They have supported the program. We've had money for NIL. And obviously we've had success in this, the second best conference in the country in the Big Ten. But what if people call him this offseason? What if other bigger jobs, let's say Florida, they open up and they call Curt Signetti? And most people go, well, it's like, you got to take the job. Because historically, 100%. Now with NIL and the transfer portal, it is clearly, I would say, leveled the playing field. Still have a huge advantage at 4 or 5 of the big boys. You're coaching Ohio State, you're coaching at Georgia, you're coaching at LSU, you're coaching at Texas or Texas A&M. You're going to get better players. You're going to have more money behind you. Your recruiting bases are better. Not even debatable. But I looked today, both of his coordinators, Mike Shanahan is his offensive coordinator, no relation, who graduated college in 2012, played football at Pitt. So he's a younger guy. Their defensive coordinator, Bryant Haynes, is probably my age. We graduated college same year, 2008. So he's 39, 40 years old. Are they going to be able to keep their two coordinators? Because historically, no chance. And what do most college coaches do when they need an OC or a DC? They look around to the best teams in the country that aren't Texas or Ohio State or Alabama that can afford to keep their guys. And they poach. So if you're Kurt Cignetti, like right now, you already realize my two coordinators, which came with me from James Madison, who are two young, trajectory pointing straight up at the sky type guys. Can we pay them $1.52 million? Because that's what happens sometimes. 2 years ago, Nick Saban tried to hire Ryan Grubb away from Kalen DeBoer, which was ironic because then DeBoer ended up becoming Alabama, brought Grubb, but then he lost him to the Seattle Seahawks. But the point was, Alabama offered him more money than they could pay him. But he chose to stay, partly because he was loyal. He thought they had a good team and ultimately made the right decision. But typically in these situations, you saw it last year with UCLA. One of the reasons Chip Kelly just mailed it in on that program is like Lincoln Riley and USC wanted his defensive coordinator, and they could just pay him more money. And they did, and he left. So if you're Cignetti, even if you really like it, you go, two factors here. Is it sustainable what we're doing? Like every year, like they're not going to expect me to win 10, 11 games every year. But can I consistently win 8, 9? Am I going to be able to get the recruits here? And only he truly knows that, being in it every day. But two, like, am I going to be able to keep my coaches? Because watching Cignetti talk, he's pretty confident. He believes in his ability. And his resume, as he said, Google me, is impressive. He wins. But it is difficult if you just factor in over a 5-year period to sustain what he's doing. Penn State's really good now. Michigan is not going to be this shitty for long. You add Oregon to the conference. Listen, the USC thing has been a debacle. They're not going to be this bad. Ohio State's always elite. And then just playing the random Wisconsins, Iowas, Minnesota, like it's hard. And I just use Florida because that's probably the easiest one to pinpoint of a team that could open that is just a hard job to turn down. That if they do call, how do you not seriously consider it? Or just plug in any job opening with that type cachet. And I think he's going to have a very, very tough decision on his hands. Because if I was an AD at one of these bigger schools and we fire our coach, he has to be one of my first calls. He really does. And if you're him, as it gets louder and louder of people coming after his coordinators, because just pick the top 10 teams in the country. LSU, Ohio State, Michigan, Texas A&M. Like if they need a coordinator on one of the sides of the ball, wouldn't you look immediately to Indiana and go, hey, what are you making? Oh, I make $1 million. Hey, we'll give you 2. That's usually what happens. You know, Penn State, Ohio State is a massive game this weekend. And I watched a decent amount of Penn State play Wisconsin on Saturday night on NBC, which is kind of weird. Some of these, I get the TV contracts change. Like, it's weird to me that the SEC is no longer on CBS and it's on ABC. I think if you're CBS, I don't know how you screwed that up. Obviously, your number one priority 24/7, 365 is the NFL. But the level of television ratings that the SEC is doing this year has to hurt them. But Penn State, Ohio State is, going to do 10 million people are going to watch this game. And Ohio State right now is in shambles. They've lost several left tackles. They can't run the ball, which I would say is not necessarily normal for a Chip Kelly team. And defensively, they just don't look as powerful as they have, obviously, in the Urban Meyer era. That has kind of been one of the downfalls of Ryan Day, is his defense just haven't been as good. And I've always thought when you have offensive coaches, especially offensive coaches who are inclined to throw the ball a lot, it's hard to develop toughness. And especially most offensive guys, former quarterbacks or guys that coach the quarterback, aren't typically innately tough, right? Jim Harbaugh, former quarterback, is an outlier. If you asked a 25-year-old football fan that had never watched Jim Harbaugh play, and you said, this guy played in the NFL, what position do you think Jim Harbaugh played in the NFL? If you didn't know anything about him, you just liked NFL football, you're too young to remember him playing, you don't remember him as a player, I think most people would guess like linebacker, like middle linebacker, safety, tight end. You would not guess quarterback. John Harbaugh, Dan Campbell, Mike Tomlin, these guys are crazy. And that's good. It's why their teams are physical, because you can't fake that shit. Andy Reid played offensive line. He's a tough guy, even though he likes to throw the ball. But at his core, like, offensive line is his baby. We'll put him on the map as a coach way back in the day. So when you tell me that, like, Sark got shoved around by Kirby, of course he did. Kirby's a crazy SOB. Safety, Georgia, tough guy, Saban mentor on defense. Like, that's his baby. Toughness, craziness, physicality. You can't fake it. Some coaches, it's harder for offensive quarterback, wide receiver type coaches to have that. It just is. And like, you watch Ohio State, no one disputes, and people, I bet there's people listening that know their roster a lot better than me. $20 million roster. They have NFL guys at every position. But like, are you tough enough? Now, the knock with James Franklin has always been, like Ohio State, he can recruit as good as anyone in the country. NFL players all over the place. Their tight end this year is a monster. He had 17 catches against USC. Their front seven is awesome. For the first time in a long time, they hire the Kansas OC. Their offense is good. Then their quarterback gets hurt last week, who was kind of a bizarre player. Last year was very, very underwhelming. Then you watch him against that USC game, which was kind of the crowning achievement of his short career. And then he gets injured in this game against Wisconsin, which was kind of getting weird for Penn State. And they bring in the backup, who's kind of got a tough name to say. It's Bo Pribula. I might be screwing that up. Comes in, actually looks kind of good. Was like 11-13, threw a touchdown, was running around, better athlete than Aller. And I don't know. I mean, I think this game is two similar coaches. Now, Ohio State and Ryan Day has accomplished more than James Franklin. He's won bigger games. Hell, he's owned James Franklin. So you have to give him the coaching mismatch. But like, watching these two teams this year, like, I don't know if I see that big of a difference. If Raiola and the Nebraska offense wasn't just an embarrassment down the stretch, like, that was a very, very winnable game. It really was. And Raiola is just kind of underachieved, might even be unfair, because I don't even know if he's achieved yet. But for all the hype, hasn't exactly been, I don't know, Tua or Trevor Lawrence in college. And I think there's a lot of pressure. Whoever wins, if Ohio State loses this game and you already got 2 losses, you talk about the pressure mounting up on Ryan Day. It would get extreme, because then you would look around the landscape and be like, well, that Oregon is a conference loss. This is a team that's not even going to be playing in the Big Ten championship. And Penn State's the answer, like, are you ever going to win one of these big games? Are you ever going to do it? When you're the underdog, playing Michigan, playing Oregon, playing Ohio State, like, James, can you do it? And I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't bet on it. I think this game's a tough game to bet, probably a stay away for me, but must watch morning Saturday. And last but not least, it's funny. You look back at that Oregon-Boise game, which I felt like went till midnight early in the season. And I watched, I remember, like, why am I staying up so late? Because I thought Oregon might lose to Boise. And it took 2 special teams, a kickoff return and a punt return, for them ultimately to win the game. But I think that game has aged pretty well, because Boise more than likely is going to be in the playoffs. They have what most people consider the best player in college football, or right up there with Travis Henry in or Travis Hunter. Travis Henry was Cincinnati Bengal wide receiver. So they beat Boise. They beat Ohio State, which is the best win of the season, I think. And then they house Illinois last week, who's good. Oregon's kind of got their swag back. And unlike, I would say, Ohio State, I do believe in their defense. Like, because their coach is a tough guy and he's a defensive coach. So if their offense plays well, which was the knock on them early in the season, the offensive line was not playing well, and Dylan Gabriel is really kind of settled into this offense, they could win the Natty, man. And we thought that when the season began. Then, like 3 or 4 weeks through, we're like, what is going on with Oregon? They look terrible. And now you kind of get that monkey off your back against Ohio State, just in the sense of like, hey, guys, we're good. We just won a huge game. We're legit. And that Boise game looked better and better each week. And then you play Illinois and you just kick their ass. Props to Dan Lanning, because it was getting weird early. He kept, tires on the truck, kept them, in the lane, because they could have easily fallen into a ditch, lost a game that they should not have lost. And now they've won some games. They definitely, that Ohio State game, you could argue they shouldn't even have won. And the way they looked against Illinois, I mean, that was, they shellacked them. That was a beatdown. So if I had to pick right now, I would probably pick Oregon to win the national championship.